Lent has now begun, I thought that I would dedicate this weekly blog to talking about an issue that I don't think many people are aware of. So what I want to talk to you about is actually very interesting. Most Christians believe themselves to be a religion. Most Jews, in fact, believe themselves to be a religion as well. And both of those are kind of untrue. The Jewish nation isn't really a religion at all. It's a blood family. In order to be a true Jew, it's nothing to do with what you believe. It's to do with whose father you have and how far back you can trace the lineage, because all Jews should descend from the 12 tribes. Now, obviously, there are converts to Judaism, and those are sort of, the term is grafted in. And the biggest load of those grafted in people are actually Christians, because here's an eye-opener for you. In the true sense, Christianity doesn't exist as a religion outside of Judaism. It's really a denomination of Judaism, and its true name is Masonic Judaism, basically. And by sorry, not Masonic, Messianic. Well, I thought that was wrong. Messianic Judaism and Christianity, there should be, in theory, absolutely no difference, because all a Christian is a grafted-in Jew with the extra revelation of Jesus Christ. That is supposed to be what it is. And of course, for Christians, it's not a religion per se. It's actually about a relationship with Jesus. So the whole idea of these three big religions, monotheistic religions, is a little bit of a misnomer. There really is one monotheistic religion, and that's Islam. And then there is a chosen race, so to speak, and I do mean literally a blood race, and a large section of Gentiles, heathen, that have been grafted in their own denomination. Once you understand it from that point of view, you see the point in having the Old Testament, which is basically the Jewish texts, included in the Christian Bible. Why else would Christianity, would the vast majority of Christianity be all the Jewish holy books? And that's because it basically is, the New Testament is basically should basically be the only difference between a Christian and a Jew. So where did this all go wrong? Well, it went wrong on two levels, basically. The first level had to do with the Jewish Reformation. The Jews had several holy books, and by the time that the Christians were organised enough to try and compile their own written form of the New Testament, the Jews were having their own sort of, I wouldn't say reformation, but they were having their own thing, and this explains the Apocrypha. The Roman Catholics have what Protestants would say are extra books of the Bible, and these extra books are Jewish books that were included in the Jewish holy texts before the Jewish Reformation. When they went through their own Reformation, they actually changed their minds on some of their canonical texts and expelled a load. Unfortunately, the early Christians had already accepted those books into their Bible, and they weren't expelled. So then you have the Christians using some of the old Jewish texts that the Jews have abandoned. So that's where the first problem came. That's the problem with the Apocrypha. And the Protestants later rejected those books or supposedly rejected, those books which the Jews had also rejected, leaving this slight difference between the Roman Catholics, which do have these abandoned texts from the Jewish culture, and the Christian Protestants, who only have the books that are in the Reformed Jewish holy texts. The second problem, I'm afraid, was the whole Roman Catholic Church. There were 300 years between the advent of this denomination, the Messianic Jews, and the Roman Catholic Church. And what happened was the Messianic Jews of the early church did not worship in churches. They actually still worshipped in Jewish holy places. They worshipped in synagogues. So in theory, all Christians should worship in synagogues. This changed on two levels. First, I think the Jews, the main bulk of the Jews, rejected, obviously, the New Testament. And so they would have seen us a lot like we see the Mormons, sort of as a sect, basically. And so basically the Christians, the early church, would move into what was called house churches, basically. And there was a lot of texts flying around hither and thither. And it progressed like that for 300 years. Now, Peter, he was the first pope, apparently. What he really was the first bishop of Rome, and his quota was to speak not to the heathen, but to speak to the Jews that had already been Jews and were changing denomination to the Messianic Jews. So Peter should speak to the Jews and not to the heathen who have converted directly to Messianic Judaism. That was the task of Paul. Now it's interesting to see how when the Roman Church took off, because Constantine had his big revelation, and I have to say, I think it's a complete fallacy. I don't think that Constantine the Great converted to Christianity at all. I think what he actually did was very clever and thought, now if I can combine everybody under one belief, I can save the empire, the Roman Empire, which is what I think he was going to do, and of course it failed. You had the split between Rome and Byzantium, and eventually the split of the Roman Church between Roman Catholicism and the Orthodox. But that's by the by. So ever since then, of course, they backtracked. So they backtracked and they said, well, all the early church bishops of Rome were popes, but they didn't know it. And they decided that they would take one of the texts that says that, you know, Peter has the keys to the kingdom, and what he says can, you know, is respected by God, be it on earth or in heaven. And they made the big assumption that that would also be passed down to all his predecessors, and that assumption is called apostolic succession, and there is absolutely no basis for that at all. There's the basis for the original idea that Peter himself had that power, but there's no basis to say that any of the other bishops that succeeded him, even before the Roman Church, had that power. So that's the real reason why I would never be a Roman Catholic. Because I cannot substantiate apostolic succession. So those were the two big things, because of course the Roman Church then wanted to make a proper classification of exactly what the difference was between the Jews and the Messianic Jews, and their way of doing that was to become an establishment. So we then had churches dedicated to our own, and it sort of grew from that. And by the time you come now, you know, there's almost no connection between Christians, modern day Christians, and Jews at all. In fact, I think a lot of Christians abandon the Old Testament altogether. which in one way is okay, because all you need is the revelation that Christ gives, of course. But in another way, you can't get the fullness, because you can't understand the New Testament without seeing the parallels in the Old Testament. You know, it's very difficult, and it's very strange, and it also goes a lot deeper than that, because the original text that the Old Testament was written in is not just a language that is readable. It's also a numeric language as well, where every letter has a value, and values correspond to pragmatical meanings. Now, that means that the letters you use to form the word matter. The order that the words are in the sentence matters, because the maths will lead to different numbers, and the numbers have pragmatical meanings. All of that is completely lost in any translation. Any translation loses that at all, because you cannot translate the numeric into a language that doesn't have numerics. As far as I know, there are now almost, I don't think there are any languages that have numerical values. The closest we get now is the sort of Chinese idea, where you can sum up a whole sentence with just one pictogram. It's that idea. So I don't know if I've explained that very well. It's sort of the best thing I can do, but if you want an accurate portrayal of what a Christian should be, you're looking at a Messianic Jew, somebody who is grafted into, adopted into Judaism from outside a tribe, or converted directly from a tribe, and you're looking at someone who, on top of that Jewish faith, has a relationship with Christ. That is what a Christian should be. And the major fault of the Roman Church is that now, consider who the Pope talks to. The Pope no longer talks to the Jews at all. He is talking to the Christians, which is ironic, because Peter did not talk to the heathen converts. Peter spoke to the Jewish converts. It was Paul that spoke to the heathen converts. And what the Roman Church has actually done is the pontiff has basically mutated from Bishop of Rome to the Jews to Bishop of Rome to the heathen. And originally those were two very, very, very different roles altogether.